Welcome to Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Kit Evans Ford. It's great to see you here. Today, we're talking about an extremely important topic, financial stewardship, something we all could benefit from. We have a very special guest today, Mrs. Kelly James Davis with Glory to God Ministries. She's the president of Glory to God Ministries. Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. So, Kelly, how did you get involved with financial stewardship?
Well, my husband and I have been involved in business and we're entrepreneurs and have been that for many years. And so at our church, they asked us to teach a class on how to help manage your money and gain control in this area of your life.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Well, I'm glad you stuck with it. Seems like you're
Yes, we
helping a
needed
lot
it
of
as
people.
well. So we teach best sometimes what we need most to learn ourselves.
Absolutely. And then you become the teachers, yeah?
That's right. That's
Wonderful,
exactly right.
wonderful. Well, what are some indicators that someone may be in financial trouble?
Well, unfortunately, most of us in America spend more than we make. We don't live within our means. We are marketed to every day, all day, to spend more and to get all of these things to enjoy our lives. And we are kind of told that that's what's going to make us happy. And unfortunately, that's not true. But we do spend beyond our means. And so when people's money runs out before the end of the month and they're not saving any money, their credit card debt is, exploding, and there starts to be more and more friction within the family about money. That's when you can really tell that something needs to be done.
Well, what is the number one problem that people face when trying to take financial control?
Well, first of all, it's probably a lack of communication. And I think that people need to understand it's not just a matter of, I'm going to do this, this, and this. It's a behavioral change. So it's a whole mindset change. And it's neat that you use the word stewardship because a lot of people don't know what that means really.
Okay. What
And,
does it mean?
well, stewardship is it comes from an old English word as a steward. And they were like the manager for the lords in the country, and they managed their finances and their whole household, all their assets. And that's what we really are. We have to go from a mindset that this is all ours and that we own everything to the point of that we're stewards over it. We're given all kinds of resources in life. Money is one of them, and we're stewards over that. It's not ours, but we manage it.
So managing what we've been gifted, what we have.
Exactly. Yeah. And that mindset is huge because if I were to give you $100 and say, "Hey, I'm coming back next week or next year or whatever. This is my money, and I just want you to manage it for me, and I'm going to be back to collect it."
Yeah.
It's different than just say, "I'm giving you this $100. Do whatever you want with it." So it's a whole different mentality.
Absolutely. And I know you mentioned the behavior piece, and I know just
Yes.
the reality. I think about the American dream,
Yes.
the big house, I think it's 2 cars, a dog, and 2 kids,
It's something like
and the
that.
garage,
Yeah.
and then the reality of so many things on television that we want and magazines and
That's
so
right.
with that behavior change, how do we shift that mentality of not, wanting to what we actually need?
Yeah, I think it's realizing what our source is, and that money does not provide happiness. It gives us an opportunity to enjoy certain things in life, but financial peace really happens when we live within our means and we gain our happiness and joy. I believe in giving and learning that it's actually in serving others, whether it's financially or with our time or with our talents. But that whole mentality, switching from it's all about me to how can I use all the resources that I've been given to bless other people in life. And I think that's the mentality shift that needs to take place.
There's a lot of beauty in the gift of giving. Yeah.
Oh, there really is. That's really one of my greatest joys, and it's something when you do go from all of these impressions. I forget what it was, but it's thousands of impressions a day that we get from all the advertising sources that are around us now with internet and phones and all of these things. It's the message is it's all about you and satisfying your wants and needs, and it's really not true. We find the joy in using our resources to help others.
Beautiful, beautiful. Now, how do we um, actually start a monthly budget and commit to a monthly budget?
That's a great question because I never had a budget and we had a lot of money at different times. I've gone from having tens of thousands of dollars a
Hmm.
month to having $1,000 a month in my lifetime.
Hmm.
So it doesn't really matter how much money you have.
Hmm.
The idea is living within your means.
Gotcha.
And so, unfortunately, most people always spend a little bit more than what they have, no matter how much they have. And so, again, it goes back to this mentality. And so it's deciding what your basics are and starting with a budget to recognize you've got to live within whatever that amount of money is. You need to learn to give and to save and then live on the rest. And that was kind of a hard lesson when you're used to always spending. When you have a lot of money, it's kind of like, oh, anything you see you want, you know you have the money for it. And so you start this mentality of, oh, I see it, I want it, I buy it. And then if your finances change, if you're in business, things go up and down. That's just life. And if you don't have a savings, if you don't have any emergency fund, if you don't have a budget, you just are being a puppet to the dictates of your own emotion and really allowing the world and all of the advertisers to determine how your life is going to turn out. And that really doesn't make much sense. We don't like to be manipulated and controlled, but we're allowing that by not telling our money where to go. And that's what a budget does for us. It puts us in control and allows us to tell our money where to go.
Telling our money where to go. That's
That's
pretty
right.
powerful. Taking control, yeah?
It really is. And it gives us control. And that's what brings the peace because we're in control. And so it was different to have a budget to begin with. It's a discipline.
Yeah.
And you need accountability. If you're married, you really need to do a budget with your spouse. This needs to be a absolute co-effort.
I see.
And if you're single, it's really important to get somebody that will hold your feet to the fire, not your shopping buddy necessarily. That's not the best accountability partner, but somebody that will, that loves you and that you say, this is what I want to do. Help me to stick with it. That you report into, depending on how far off the mark you are, it might be on a weekly basis, maybe, twice a month or once a month. But at the beginning of every month, to have a written budget and have a plan makes all the difference in how you'll end up at the end of the month.
Yeah, for me, it sounds like a exercise partner. It's
Exactly.
like a financial exercise partner that keeps you disciplined to stick with it. Yeah?
Exactly.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Very helpful information. Now, do people need a fancy software to plan a budget? Stick with it?
Absolutely not. It's very basic. And once you cover your essentials, your food, your housing, clothing, and just your basic things like that, those are the most important things that you need to take care of for your family. And you might need to cut back. I think one of the biggest problems that people face in a budget is their unawareness, unconsciousness of where they're spending their money. And that's what I found for myself. And as we teach people that's the number one thing. Oh, I had no idea I was spending so much money on this or that. And so it's the awareness and the consciousness that people need to have about where their money's going. And so once they've done that, and that's just a matter of going through, if you have a credit card, looking at your reports, your checkbook, and actually seeing where you've spent your money. And that's the biggest revelation. And then you work from there.
Okay, now what if people find out that their expenses are larger than their income? What do they do? Because it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that from personal experience. And so, it's just like, hey, I can't live like this.
Right.
We're not the federal government. We can't go print our own money. So we have to live within a budget. Otherwise, it just is creating, and that's what so many people do. They don't have this awareness, and so they charge more on their credit cards. Oh, I need more. They charge, and then all of a sudden they find themselves in this huge financial debt, paying these minimum payments, and just are overwhelmed. And then if some unexpected thing happens, it just creates this crisis. and creates all kinds of problems in families and stress, and it goes downhill from there.
So what happens? I know sometimes, and I know this has been true for myself. I'm guilty of this. Starting a budget, and then getting off track and just eventually forgetting about it and continuing with the same type of patterns. So what happens if someone gets off track with their budget? What do they do?
Well, again, hopefully they have this an accountability partner.
Okay,
And so,
accountability partner.
yeah, having
Gotcha.
somebody that'll hold their feet to the fire.
Mhm.
And like you said, if you're married, then at the beginning of the month, one person usually in a couple is more prone to detail and likes to do things on the computer. And you don't need to have a computer at all, but you
Mhm.
just write down these expenses. And at first, it's just determining where you do spend your
I
money,
see.
writing them down. And then if you notice that, oh my gosh, I had no idea I was spending so much money eating
Mhm.
out, or I've
Okay.
had so much money, I spent so much money on gas or whatever
Mhm.
it might
Mhm.
be.
Mhm.
Again, all of these impulse purchases.
Okay. So it's kind of like keeping a journal of everything
Exactly.
that
Yeah,
you.
you write it down and through your checkbook. And most people these days do things. They don't, we're getting less and less
Mhm.
cash oriented.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So it's so important to be aware. And then as you look at all of these things, you say, oh, I don't choose to do that anymore. And it causes you to plan. So in our case, we were spending way more money on eating
Mm.
out. So
Okay.
again, we were, okay, well, how can I fix that? Well, hello, you don't go to the restaurant. You actually plan a
Right.
meal
Right.
and you eat at home, and go to places that, you know, sell groceries for less. I mean,
Yeah.
I never had an idea how much stuff costs. If I wanted it, I bought it, and I didn't have a list when I went to the
Yeah.
grocery store. I didn't have, and so we threw a lot of food away. We were very
Gotcha.
wasteful. And
Mhm.
all of these things happen once you decide you're going to do a budget. You plan, you're less
Mhm.
wasteful, you spend less time because you buy it all at once, pretty much.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so there's a lot of things that we can do, and things that we don't use. I mean,
Mhm.
there's things that we might have pay a certain amount of money to go to a gym or something, and we never go, or we might be paying for other things that we never use. And so you start to become aware of that, and you sort of like cut out the fat and
Mm.
get down to a
Mhm.
lean budget until you can get within your means
Mhm.
and learn to live like that. And
Mhm.
then all of a sudden things start to change.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, Kelly, you've given us some extremely helpful resources on financial stewardship. Where can people go to get more to find out about resources and get more information?
A lot of people's churches have open classes that, whether you belong to that church or not, you can
Mhm.
sign up for them. So there's all kinds of stuff with that. Or any of those things in your local area, there's lots of resources that people can get. And these classes are reasonable. And believe me, whatever they charge, if it's a
Yeah.
fairly small amount, you're going to gain that back within the first couple of
Mm.
weeks when you
Mhm.
start doing some of these
Mhm.
principles.
It's worth it. Yeah. Well, thank you, Kelly. Thank you so much for this very helpful information on financial stewardship. I know I was taking notes. Yeah.
Okay,
So I
good. Thank
appreciate
you.
you. All right. So thank you for tuning in to Joy in Our Town. We'll see you when we come right back. Thank you.
See these hands? They grip the wheel of a Humvee in Afghanistan.
These hands, 6 years treating soldiers.
12 years flying choppers.
We know you're strong, but sometimes you need a helping hand. You served us. Now let us serve you. The Iowa City VA Healthcare System.
Welcome back to Joy in Our Town. I'm your host, Kit Evans Ford. Today we have a very special guest who's coming back, Miss Kelly James Davis, president of Glory to God Ministries. Kelly, welcome back.
Thank you. So good to be here.
Absolutely. It's great to have you back. We are speaking today about a very important topic, the importance of an emergency fund. Kelly, let's get started with talking about this very important topic.
Yes, it
So
is.
how important is an emergency fund to a person's budget?
It's totally important because emergencies happen.
Yeah.
Guess what? Cars break down.
Absolutely.
Things
Absolutely.
happen.
It's always something.
Yeah, accidents happen. If you have kids, and it really happens. But even just for a single person, anybody, an emergency fund is huge. and it develops a habit of saving, which is something I personally struggled with. And so having an emergency fund was something I never had, and it just gives people a sense of peace. You know, when you have something that's there, it's just a really huge part of your financial stewardship.
Okay, and how large should an emergency fund be?
You know, to begin with, just having $1,000 aside is really, really important. If you make very small amount of money, then maybe $500 if you're a single person, and that might cover it. But for most people, just having $1,000 set aside just for emergencies, that's the key word.
Emergency. So
Yeah,
what's
it's like, you know, a sale at Dillard's is not an emergency.
Gotcha. Even though sometimes we may feel like it is, it's not.
Yeah. Oh, it's going to be such a good thing. My husband always says, I wish I had a savings account for all the savings that you've purchased.
Okay.
You know, so,
okay, gotcha.
So those aren't emergencies.
Yeah, so it's actually determining what you need and what you actually want. Yeah?
Exactly. Yeah, there's a big distinction there.
Big difference.
And so, yeah, emergencies are. It's like car breaking down or an accident and somebody has to run to the emergency room or things like that. Those are real emergencies that affect, again, food, transportation, those kinds of things.
And I know some people, in my family, a couple of my loved ones, and people that I know as well, will have $25 or $50 taken out of every account to that emergency fund.
Oh, yes.
Out of every paycheck.
That's an excellent idea.
Yeah, how did you start your emergency fund?
Well, it's interesting because the month that we started doing this was actually our tightest month of the year.
Wow.
We own properties, and it was the last payment of all of the property taxes due for the year, and so it was very tight. So it was hard to come up with that first initial emergency fund, but you just lower your spending. You don't, like we had mentioned before, you don't go out to eat as much. You don't do as much entertainment. Those are options in life, and there are other ways. There are so many things that we can do to lower those costs and still have fun and even have maybe even a richer experience. And so another way that you can develop emergency fund if you don't have money is sell stuff. Gosh, we had a person in our class the other day said, I made $70 in the last 2 days just selling stuff. So there's so many things in our homes and in our garages that we're not using, that we don't have, that you can just sell. Have a garage sale.
Great idea.
So there's so many things that we can do to increase our savings and the amount of money that we can have for this fund, even if our expenses are high at that time. And so we even did it on this month that was really tough for us every year because we hadn't been budgeting the year before. That was so great. The first year after we budgeted and it came to that month, it was just no problem because we had taken care of it all year long instead of using that fund as our emergency fund.
Gotcha.
And I think a lot of people will do that. They'll have a savings fund or something else and they draw from it because they haven't really planned for that. And the idea that you said, having it automatically done where it's not an emotional decision, it's just automatically taken out, is an excellent idea.
And should this fund be easily accessible?
It should be, because emergencies do happen. You should never really draw from like a 401k fund because it's expensive and there's all kinds of ramifications that make that not the best choice. But having it like in a money market account, something that you're not getting a lot of, it's not like you're making a lot of interest or that on it, but it's available to you. And again, having somebody where you don't touch that, you agree that this money does not get touched unless you've basically cleared it with your accountability partner or your spouse. And so just to make sure that emergency is really an emergency.
Okay. So when money is handled in an effective way,
Right.
including the emergency fund,
Right.
how does this affect our self-esteem?
Oh, it's so important because we have that peace and that knowledge that I think sometimes people, and again, we're so keeping up with the Joneses sometimes in our society.
Absolutely.
And so to know that, I don't have an emergency fund. If something happened, then we start to have a pretense and people try to be something that they're not, or try to impress people to a position where they're not. And so it just gives you that peace to know if something happens, I can take care of it. And then in the next month, you can build up that emergency fund again. And I've used our emergency fund on a couple occasions for something I wasn't expecting, I hadn't budgeted, and then in the next month or two we fill it up. And when you're a good steward over your money and you're giving regularly, you know what? I just think God blesses you, and so He knows what our needs are. And when we are faithful to do things His way, He provides everything that we need. And it's a test sometimes, but it really comes through.
Yeah, one thing that you keep bringing up throughout is that peace that you get when you have that emergency fund, when you stick to that budget, even though sometimes it may get kind of intense because it seems like it's a behavior patterns have to change.
Absolutely.
And, that peace affects mind, body, spirit.
It totally does. And it really, divorce, the number one cause of divorce is finances. So, Kit, it's so important that people communicate. And when we've had so many people in our classes that have said this has affected their marriages incredibly, and it really affected our marriage. This was something that we discussed all the time. And we, like I said, in times when we had plenty or in times when it wasn't as plenty, it was still a problem. And it didn't need to be because we hadn't communicated. And so when you get that peace and you know what you're on the same page with, it's not going to create this conflict. So you're doing it and it just makes a big difference. And when these emergencies come up, you've got something to take care of it, you replenish it, and having peace at home between spouses affects the kids, and if you're married and have kids, get your kids on this.
Absolutely.
So if you're budgeting and you're having to cut out certain things that affect them, if you communicate with them in advance and say, this is what we're doing and why we're doing it, and at the end, we're going to reward ourselves with a vacation or this. Awesome. Then they understand and they're part of the team, and let them participate. Once we get ahead and get some things going here, what would you like? And get them a part of it. And it's teaching them incredibly important principles for later in their life because they're not getting this anywhere else.
That's exciting.
It is.
And most banks, I think, you can open up a youth account for a child as well.
Yeah, and savings account in most banks they're free. I mean, there's no charge for them, and it feels so good to look at that and know you've got this little chunk of change over there. The budget is the number one thing because that's going to help you to develop the emergency fund, and having just a little amount, that $1,000, it might not seem like a little to some people, but almost everybody in our classes at all ranges of income have been able to get that $1,000 together. It's amazing once you set a goal and put your focus on it and you agree with it, amazing things happen. And so then, once you've got that, then you start working on your debt. And you do kind of like what they call a debt snowball. You take your smallest debt, you get that paid off, and then you take that amount and put it towards your next debt. So say you had a small credit card bill and it was, maybe a couple $100. Well, you get that paid off. Okay. Because you cut down your budget. And so, you've cut down your expenses. You get that paid off, and then whatever that amount that you were paying on that, say it was $30 a month, you take that $30 and apply that towards your next smallest debt. Okay. And you just keep doing that until the point where at some point you might be paying thousands of dollars a month off a larger debt. And it just keeps snowballing. And it's just amazing because, again, I think God really blesses people that do this, and they have incredible stories.
And what happens to, you're talking about the snowball effect and, paying off debt. So what happens to the psyche when you can pay off that debt but also have an emergency fund as well in place?
Well, you just feel fantastic. Yeah. You really feel, exactly, you celebrate. And it's important along the way. Like I think, personally, this is just my personality, but I like to get a reward when I've done something right for a long time. So it's different for different people. It might be every 3 months, then go out to dinner. Do something to celebrate a victory. You paid off a credit card. Don't go crazy, but take a small amount of money and enjoy yourself. Absolutely. Give yourself a celebration. Give yourself a reward. And again, if you're doing it as a family, let everybody participate in it, and it makes all the difference. And then you go back, and eventually you'd like to have a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. Whatever your monthly budget is, say it's $5,000 a month or $4,000, whatever it is, then you want to have 3 to 6 months of that saved aside for an emergency if you lost your job or if you had a medical emergency or something. Again, what peace you'd have knowing that was there.
Such peace.
It makes such a difference.
Such peace. Now, are there any success stories that you'd like to share as we conclude our interview?
Well, our own story was great. Just to be able to have the money set aside for the things that we did and doing our budget. And again, going back to property taxes and having all of those in place and never having to worry and never having to borrow from it because we kept to our budget relatively. And I tell you, I'm not perfect. I want people to understand, if you mess up on your budget, that's okay. I started out and have a large miscellaneous fund so that if you run out of this, I can use that miscellaneous fund to, I'm not perfect in it, but having that structure makes a big difference. And so it made a huge difference in our marriage. It made a huge difference in our ability to save, and we have more fun. It's just amazing.
Fun is always good.
Well, yes, and really we're spending less and we're enjoying more. It's so opposite what we're trained to think.
Yeah.
Our life, we give 40 hours a week usually for money. So it's a huge part of our life, and it's not unspiritual to talk about it. It's not a bad thing. Money isn't evil. It's what we have to deal with, and we have to confront it and deal with it. And like we started out before, we have to tell our money where to go. That's really what it comes down to. So that's making that choice. I'm going to be in control of my money and not allow everybody else to tell me where to go.
Absolutely. Well, Kelly, thank you so much
So
for
excited
such
to be here.
helpful information on creating an emergency fund and budgeting and financial stewardship. We really appreciate you. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Kelly. And thank you, viewers, for joining us on Joy in Our Town. We'll see you next time.
This program has been sponsored by the Trinity Broadcasting Network and made possible by your telethon dollars. Your continual support can keep Joy in Our Town brought to your home every day. So write Joy in Our Town, P.O. Box A, Santa Ana, California, 92711.